Hello, students. Hello, masters of your own destiny. How is everybody doing? What is the destiny? What is the goal today? Are you asking me how I'm doing? I'm doing fantastic now that you're here with me. Okay, so for me, my imagination, you are in the other side of the screen and you just ask me how I'm doing, so I'm just answering your question. I think it's a way for me to cope with the fact that I miss you guys so much, but I'm very happy to know that you're back here with me from Suarez Basement, a video podcast created especially for you, those students in the communication, media, and the arts. Like I always say, and let me move this one over here. Please, if you have not done it yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram, and also now we are in Twitter. That communication and interaction with you is extremely important to us. Today, like always, we bring an expert in the field. We have Curran Bhatia with us. He's four-time Emmy nominee for his work in HBO Sports. He's an excellent sport producer and an online and on-camera personality. I cannot wait to have this conversation with Curran. And like I always do, I invite two of my former students to be part of the conversation. Why? Because I believe this is a video podcast created for you and by you, the student. What students bring to the conversation, bring the video podcast to a totally different level. We have Connor Douglas, a former student of mine in my video production classes, and we also have Bo Drake Dizzy, former student of mine in two of my video production classes too. Both of them are pursuing their careers in sport broadcasting, so can you imagine the conversation we're going to have? Awesome. So again, thank you for being here with me, and let's start our conversation with Curran right away. Here we go.
Oh, it's an absolute honor to be here. Thank you, Francisco. Thank you, Bo. Thanks you, Connor. Thanks everyone else involved in this. Like I said, it's an absolute honor for me, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before we go into the whole sport arena and all this stuff, I just, of course, want to ask you, how you doing? How is your family? How is quarantine going?
Yeah, no, it's obviously tough for everyone right now. On a lot of the work I'm doing as an on-air storyteller and interviewer, that's always the first question, right? Like, forget everything else. We'll figure that out later. How are you doing? Are you safe? So luckily for me, I'm safe. I'm good. My wife and I live in New York City in central Manhattan. We left in early March, and we've been in New Jersey with family. So just kind of waiting it out, seeing what happens. But the important thing is, we're with family and everyone's good and everyone's safe.
That is the important part. Okay, well, guys, if you want to introduce yourself, so I know you very well. You were in my classes, but I want to take the opportunity for Coran to know you a little better. So, well.
So, hi again. My name is Bo, and I'm going to be a senior this coming fall. I've been in Professor Suarez's class since freshman year, I believe. I was a TA for him 2 years ago, and I worked on the holiday TV special with him. And right now, I'm working as hard as I can to get into sports broadcasting, play-by-play analysis, anything in that area. Just gotta love sports, all of it.
Great.
I'm Connor, and I'm a graduate of Oswego this past semester, and I was in 3 of Suarez's classes through my time at Oswego, and now I'm going to be attending Georgetown for sports industry management for my master's.
Woo-hoo!
Great, congratulations.
Thank you.
So I think I'm getting the honor of the first question here. So when Professor Suarez asked me to do this, and I've seen a couple of your videos because I'm a big fan of the UFC and I'm a big fan of boxing. So I've seen a few of your interviews. I especially loved your Game Bread interview.
Okay.
But when I saw your career, I noticed very earlier on you were working for financially oriented businesses, doing a lot of accounting and things like that. So what made you jump from that to sports, and is that something that you still hold in your heart when you do your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm going to answer your question, even though you are a Patriots fan, from what it looks like.
Yeah.
I'm a Jets fan, so this is already we'll get past it, and yeah. So my background, I have not worked in the financial world or anything like that. I've always been in sports, film and TV. That's always been the passion of mine. I went to NYU. I did a lot of internships at small post houses in the city. And that would be my recommendation to anyone who's maybe in college, high school, starting out, is go to the places you want to work, offer your services, get in the door. And I think just by being around the type of work you want to do, if you're just like a helping hand, and, for example, if you want to be an editor, being an editor's assistant, or offering to just log footage, look through footage. And then one day when that editor is sick or can't make it, you can kind of jump in the chair and have your opportunity. I think just being around what you want to do is always really great and helpful. And for me in my journey, it was always film and TV was a passion of mine. And I also love sports, as we all do. I love combat sports specifically. And when I, wanted to decide what I wanted to do, I was looking to merge my passions there. And I was lucky enough to get the opportunity at HBO to be a producer. And a lot of our work was related to boxing because HBO covered boxing for a long time. And so I was lucky enough to produce, direct, write, edit at HBO for a long time, almost a decade. And since then, in the last few years, I've transitioned to in front of the camera to do on-air broadcasting, play-by-play, interviewing. And I found, a continued form of my passion before from behind the camera and now in front of the camera.
So you were mentioning earlier that you have a long history with boxing and just the history and love for UFC and boxing. As we're recording this just a couple hours ago, Mike Tyson announced that he's going to be coming back into the ring. And my question to you is, how do you stay on top of everything, with just recently Mike Tyson, and also today NHL announced the Krakens as the new NHL team. So there's just so much sports news even during these crazy times. So how do you stay on top of everything?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think when you have a passion for it, you just inherently are just tuned into this stuff, right? You have your finger on the pulse, because if you're following these, whatever sport you're into or whatever your passion is, it doesn't have to be sports. You're following all these accounts on Twitter, on social media. You're following players or whoever's the important principles in whatever you like to do. So in the case of Mike Tyson and Roy Jones announcing that they're going to fight, I believe they're 53 and 51 years old. I was lucky enough to work with Roy Jones when I was at HBO, worked side by side with him, and he was just a really, really great man. I learned a lot from him. He saw things in the boxing ring that I just think no one else saw, and I think that's just based on his experience of fighting for as long as he did, being as dominant as he was in the 1990s, the pound for pound champion for such a long time. And I think he just sees things differently. And my quick Roy Jones story is, I was sitting ringside. I was working with our announcers, Roy Jones, of course, to my left. And there was a young fighter on an undercard. He got knocked down. And when he was trying to get himself together, he didn't look to his corner, to his trainer. He looked at Roy because he idolized Roy. And Roy gave him, a quick 10 seconds of advice, like keep your hands up, keep the chin tucked type thing. And it helped that fighter at least make it through the round. So he's obviously a hero to many. And we know, of course, Mike Tyson is too. So things like that, you're going to see those news stories everywhere because they're such big characters. But there's also lower level fighters, lower level stories. And I think my answer to that is just, if you have a passion to it, you'll find it.
So I think that leads pretty much very well into what I want to ask, but you talk about your love for the fight game and for boxing and MMA like that. But what is it about those things that draws you in?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I mean, I love sports, and I have, a lot of interest outside of sports as well, but specifically combat sports have always been my favorite. And the reason is, for me personally, I just feel like it's the ultimate form of competition. And what I mean by that is, if you are in another sport, let's say baseball or basketball or whatever, when the athletes are playing and they get really hyped up or angry, what do they do? They start fighting, right? You see a baseball player, charge the mound and try to fight, or in hockey, right? You throw down the gloves and you start fighting. So in combat sports, there's nowhere else to go. You're already doing that. You're already fighting. Yeah. And I just feel like the one-on-one, man-on-man, woman-on-woman, the ultimate form of competition, like I said, it's just you two. There's nowhere else to go. And I just enjoy watching that craft and watching the stylistic matchups. There's so many different types of styles you can have in fighting. And even in boxing, where it's more limited than MMA, technically you could say that there's only 5 punches, like a jab, a right hand, hook, uppercut, but there's still so many ways to go about that in terms of your movement, your defense. And I love seeing how people bring in their creativity, their own styles, and how that matches up with other styles and other people. And the most important thing I would say is just what the storylines are, who the people are, and what they're fighting for. There's usually a bigger reason than just wanting to compete, fighting for their country, sometimes to get out of poverty, for their family, things like that, for their legacy, for money sometimes. So I just always find those storylines, very intriguing, especially in combat sports.
The one will.
And and Curran, I do have a question that not necessarily relate with sports. However,
Sure.
it relate with your career. You have a great career for a person that, you are a young guy that have accomplished quite a lot of good things. And one of the things that I try with my students, all of them, is the idea of self-doubt, right? How I have those moments. I'm not going to say my age, but, even at my age, I have days where I feel self-doubt. Like, I don't know if I should be doing this. I don't know if this is what I am supposed to be doing. How do you jump those moments where you, Curran, who have accomplished so much, that day you wake up and say, you know what, I think I'm in the wrong business, or I don't think I'm doing it right. How you jump that problem?
Yeah, no, in terms of self-doubt, in terms of following your passion, I would say, obviously lean into what makes you tick, what excites you, what is the thing you want to do. And I don't think you should put a restriction on that in terms of, I don't know how to get there. Find out the thing you really want to do, and then you have to just start doing it. So, I listen to a lot of positivity people, motivational type people. For example, one person I would listen to a lot is Gary Vee. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of his talks. And one of my favorite moments is when a young boy went up to him and said, do you have any advice on how to be an entrepreneur? And his answer was simple. He said, you have to be an entrepreneur. And he said, yeah, do you have any advice? He said, no, that is the advice. You have to do it. So I think that's been the key for me in all of these things. I wanted to get into film and TV. So in high school, I started the first film festival in my high school, and I just picked up a camera and I started shooting and editing and getting my hands dirty and learning on the fly. And then when I realized I wanted to do on-air broadcasting, I picked up the microphone and I went to any, in the case of boxing, I just went to every press conference I could. If I couldn't get inside, I would do a stand-up on camera from the outside. And luckily I had a lot of contacts because of my work at HBO for nearly a decade. So most of the time I was able to get good access. And in that case, again, it was just get my hands dirty, start interviewing people, start doing play-by-play, start doing on-camera debate shows and practicing, and just keep working your craft. I launched my podcast, my YouTube channel. And I think for anyone out there who's on the fence, having doubts, I mean, the answer is just to do it, and you'll get better as you go along. Don't let perfection be the enemy of execution. You want to just get out there and start doing. And your episode 1 of your podcast or your YouTube channel or whatever will be so different from your episode 50. But to get to your episode 50, you have to start at your episode 1, and you have to just put yourself out there and make it happen. So that would be my advice if you have any doubt.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's exactly. I fully agree with you.
So something a little bit similar. My question to you is, what attribute do you think is most needed for someone to succeed in the sports broadcasting industry? You know, we see all these different athletes come and take jobs that, a lot of us, up and comers are like, man, I want that job. But, Forrest Griffin takes it, or like one of these former retired athletes. How do we get a certain attribute to kind of, make sure that we can show our craft?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different ways. Obviously, if you are an ex-athlete of that sport, you're going to be uniquely qualified to talk about that sport. And that's a good thing. We want people who have done that craft to talk about it. But if you haven't done that, that's okay. I think you have to find your own, whatever it is about you that makes you unique. So for me, for example, when I first started my podcast, I wanted to interview the top people in combat sports. I've been lucky enough to do that. You mentioned Jorge Masvidal. I've interviewed Deontay Wilder, Clarissa Shields, on. And luckily the top names. But when I first started episode 1, the name of my podcast is Ask the Experts with Curran Bhatia. And the reason it's called Ask the Experts is I said, I'm going to find these stories that no one else is telling. And what I mean by that is, one of the early episodes was around Anthony Joshua shockingly lost to Andy Ruiz the first time he fought. And obviously a lot of people are going to be talking about that fight. I wanted to find the interesting angles. So I found the ring doctor who had to examine Anthony Joshua after the fight. And I went up to him, I introduced myself, and I did an interview with him for the podcast. I interviewed the ringside photographer. I asked him, did he notice anything in the locker room with Joshua before the fight that made you seem, maybe he's not on his A game? I interviewed people in the production world who I had a lot of contacts with because I worked alongside them. And that's how it started. And lucky enough, I've still been able to talk to experts, but I've been able to evolve it to also talk to top athletes in the game. But to answer your question, I would say find a unique angle that you're doing that not other people are doing. Find those unique and interesting stories, and those unique and interesting characters, and tell the story that way. And that'll be your edge to help you stand out from the crowd.
So with being a journalist, we always have our certain biases towards stuff. We always favor somebody over another person. So when you're interviewing someone, how do you make sure that your bias doesn't really show and you're kind of going straight forward with the topic?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I always like to kind of play it down the center because I feel like that's most effective. I personally enjoy asking the tough question. I was lucky enough to interview Deontay Wilder. Like I said, he was the former heavyweight champion of the world. At the time that I interviewed him, he was undefeated. He was the heavyweight champion with the WBC title. And we had in the sport of boxing that year up to that point, we had 5 deaths in the boxing ring. So 5 tragedies, which is just terrible. No one wants that. And Deontay Wilder, for as great of a champion he is, one of the things he said is that he wants a body on his record. And what he meant by that is that he basically wants to end someone's life in the boxing ring. And part of that is his mindset, his aura. That's the mindset he needs to have to be successful at what he does. But I wanted to ask him that question, and I did. If you can see my interview on my YouTube page, where I asked him that question. But I didn't want to do it in a way of the whole gotcha journalism or anything like that. I simply stated the facts, which is that we had 5 deaths in the sport of boxing. This is what you've said in the past. Do you still stand by that? And obviously, that's not an easy thing to do, to ask a tough question, especially if it's the heavyweight champion of the world. It makes it a little harder. But I asked the question, and he, to his credit, he gave me a straight up answer. He said, "I am who I am. My mindset will never change." He owned that. And so, to answer your question, I would say just know what you want to ask. Don't try to find that gotcha journalism angle. Present the facts, but don't be afraid to ask the tough question.
So my next question, it seems like sports is kind of infused in politics now. We see like politics and back and forth. So do you think sports should continue that spirit of having politics be kind of mentioned and talked about, or do you think it should be separated into the 2 different categories?
I think athletes are human beings. They're players. They're people. And so if there's a political aspect to a certain story, then that should definitely be talked about. If you look at obviously the great the Colin Kaepernick story and what he's done, that's an important story. I don't think you shy away from that just because it gets political. So if there's a reason to bring in a political aspect to it, then I think that's a good thing. I was lucky enough to interview Adam Kovnowski, who at the time was an undefeated Polish heavyweight fighter. And I was able to interview him. My interview was airing on Fox Sports, which is a huge honor for me. And the first thing I started off in our interview was I talked about that immigrant mentality, because that's something I'm passionate about, and I know that he was passionate about. He was an immigrant from Poland, came here with not a lot, and him and his family, they've risen, they've become successful, they've given back to the community, and now he's on that heavyweight championship level, and I think that's a great story. So I wanted to talk about that, and when I put that interview up, I got some comments from people who weren't super happy about me saying those kind of comments. I don't care. I think that's the important right thing to talk about. There was another time I was the field producer for Amir Khan, who's another well-known boxer from the UK. And he's been outspoken about his community, his religion. He's Muslim. And so we did a scene where we went with him to his mosque to see him in his community. He's a hero to his community, and see the people rally around him. And the important storyline there was that his point was that in any group, there's going to be a group of bad people, but there's far many more good people, right? And that's the important thing. And what he said was, we're all one, we're all the same, we're all human, and we all need to respect each other. So that was the story I wanted to tell at that time. And so I think if that's the story you want to tell, then I think you should absolutely do it.
So, Curran, before we go and have to say goodbye, I want to give you the opportunity, of course, to speak to many of our students that are out there that are into sport broadcasting or any kind of communication media in the art field. What is your, lesson or your message to these students?
Yeah, the biggest thing I could say to anyone who wants to get into sports broadcasting or producing, directing, or anything in that world is, the people who you feel like are booing you are going to be on the sidelines. They're not doing what you're doing. And so you need to just get out there and create, figure out what it is you want to do, and then just start to get your reps in. I think if you're getting on an Instagram live and talking about that topic, I don't care if you have 0, viewers at that point, you're winning because you're doing the thing you want to do. So the biggest thing I would say is just get out there, get your hands dirty. Stop saying, when this happens, I'll do this. Or if I just had this, I could create this. Most people probably watching this have an iPhone in your pocket. That's probably all you need to at least start creating something. And you'll get better as you go along. You'll get better equipment. You'll get more reps. You'll learn. But just to get to that point, you just have to get out and start doing. And that's the biggest thing I would say.
Walk the walk.
Yes.
Yeah. Curran, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Incredibly to have you with us. Please keep safe. Say hi to the family from all of us. And this is your house. Anytime we're here, and hopefully we can keep in touch.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. Thanks, Francisco, Bo, Connor. Anyone watching this, if you want to reach out to me, you can see my YouTube page, youtube.com/Curran Bhatia. I'm on Instagram and Twitter @Curran Bhatia. If you have any questions, need advice, anything that I can help with in any way, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Curran.
Thank you, guys.